All right, guys, let's start. So welcome everyone back to lab session number 3 of this course, CSF 425 Deep Learning. I'm Palash Agrawal, as you guys must know. And let's actually start with today's lab session. In today's lab session, we're actually going to cover computer vision. We're going to start with computer vision. Before that, let's actually go back to our last lab. And if you guys remember, and I asked you all to go back to the notebook where you made your lab session number 2. Guys, can anyone resend the link for anyone who wants it on the chat box to lab session number 2? And if you remember, we weren't getting our model wasn't working at we weren't getting any much accuracy. I mean, we had 10 classes and we couldn't even go ahead of 10% accuracy, which means that the results were sort of random. So the model was not learning anything at all. So let's actually first debug that before we actually move on to computer vision. And so I'll tell you why the model wasn't working, and that's a good learning experience for all of us. And let's actually just run this model first as it was last time, and let's actually verify that what was actually happening in our model. Yep, 11% accuracy, and I'm sure it's gonna keep on revolving around there as well, which means that the model is not learning anything. Yep. All right, so let me just stop it over here. Let's actually debug this over here, and let me actually show you a few things. The first problem that I thought that was what exactly is happening, and I found out that the parameters were not getting updated at all. Let's actually try something. Whenever we want to update the parameters, let's actually also print the shape of P or the parameters itself to see what's happening. For example, P dot shape. Let it go. All right, let's run this and let's see what happens. So do you guys see that it wasn't printed at all? None of the shapes were printed at all, which means that the model is not going within that for loop itself. Now wonder why that is. So let's actually, which means that model.parameters over here for p and self.params, which is nothing but model.parameters must be empty. Well, there's nothing inside of this class, and let's verify that for sure. Model.parameters. It shows that it's a generator object, but let's actually print something in it. Right, see. So there's nothing being printed, which means that model.parameters though exists as a class, but it doesn't contain anything. So that was actually a mistake on our end. And what I realized that we assumed that the model would essentially be, it can tap into whatever layers they are, and it can like find out whatever parameters exist in this model. But that's not actually true. We need to explicitly tell PyTorch where to look for parameters, right? So let's actually, for that, let's actually refactor this entire thing. And I actually commented out something, and I was trying out a few things. And I'll tell you essentially what you need to do. We define model.layers, and now what you need to do is actually call something known as self.add module. And let's see what that is. Torch.nn.module.add module. And essentially, the job of this self.add module is to it adds a child module to the current module. And what essentially is a module in PyTorch is nothing but is something which is a part of that model itself, right? Anything which has all the properties which a model is supposed to have, that's called a module in PyTorch. What PyTorch will internally do that once if we tell PyTorch that these are the layers and I want them to be my modules within my model itself, it will automatically find out like whatever needs to be done. It will, like list all its parameters. It will give you some nice what do you call visualization stuff, so that when you can actually see like what's the sequence of steps going on. So for that, all you need to do is like add a simple line of code over here, and let me just comment this out. Let me just run this over here. And you can either write it on your own or you can directly copy paste it from whatever I've done. But essentially what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go through all of these layers that I've created over here. And I'm going to go self.add module. I'm going to give it a name so that I can, later access it. And I'm going to list it as a module. Simple as that. And now my forward will simply become like, since I've now made them modules, I can simply go as I can iterate through modules, and I can like pass my input through all those layers as is. So let's see if this works. All right, this thing works. Yep, it's working. And okay, let me also show you a cool thing. Now if I just type model over here, let's see what happens. Okay, there's this cool visualization over here which says that there's this layer 0, which is a linear function over here. Then there's layer 1, which is a ReLU, layer 2, which is also a ReLU, a linear layer. And so if you see over here, that is exactly what I did over here. So it went through. I typed enumerate over here, which meant that I'm going to go from layer 0, layer 1, layer 2, and I'm going to name all of these layers something. So this became layer 0. Right? This became layer 1 and this became layer 2. And now what you can do is that if you want to access any specific part of this model, all you need to do is that model dot layer 0, for example. And look, you can directly access what do you call this particular module within our module itself. So that's a really cool thing. All right. Let's now, okay, since now we've listed all our parameters within the model itself. We told PyTorch that here are the parameters of the model. Let's try to run our model again. There is actually one more thing that we need to do, but let me just show you. All right, so it printed the shapes in the first time, which means that it's going within the for loop. All right. Epoch 1. All right. But it's still not learning. I mean, it's still less than run. Okay, now here's a cool thing. Let me just stop it over here. So now you see that it went through them once, but it didn't go through them again. And so between epoch 1 and epoch 2, there was nothing printed, meaning it never went into the for loop again. Now, okay, so we need to solve this over here. And so the problem must be in our optimizer itself, which means that it only goes through this particular part only once, right? You get that point? Because it's only printed once, it means that it's going within the for loop only once. And so what might be the problem? Let's actually see that. So self.params, which is model.parameters, is nothing but a generator object. A generator is something that you can iterate. But the problem with generators is that you can only iterate through a generator only once, right? For example, let me just verify this for you. Through generator Python. Right. So unless your generator is infinite, you can iterate through it one time only. So that's exactly what's happening over here. We're trying to iterate through it, but the generator can only be iterated through once. And so what we need to do is we need to actually convert it into something that can be iterated again and again. So a simple way to do that is to just convert it into a list. A list can be iterated again and again. A generator cannot be iterated again and again. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that optimizer, and I'm just going to do list params over here. Follow me, guys. So let's actually try running a model now. Okay, yeah. So it's now it's going again and again because you see it's printing again and again and again. So let me just stop it and I'll remove the because now I know it's working. Let me just remove that print statement. Where is it? Uh, yep. Sorry. Yeah, here it is. Let me just remove this print statement. And just for refactorization purposes, I'll just bring this over here. I just like this more. All right. So let's just run this again. Yep. So yeah, look at this. Within the first step itself, we are now at 90% accuracy. And this is a good score. 92%. 92, slight more increase. And so, okay, now, so you now see that the model is now working. And so we've now solved our normal multi-layer problem. And this is a neural network model which you can use for many things. You can use it for normal feature classification, and maybe we'll look at something known as collaborative filtering, which is the thing that is used for recommendation systems by Amazon, Spotify, Netflix, stuff like that. We'll maybe learn that as well. And yep, this is your model. So you see that we're now at 94% accuracy. Might reach 95% accuracy very easily in less than 1 minute, I guess. All right. So I'll just stop it over here. You guys can play around with it. You can play around with the hyperparameters if you want. Let's actually come to lab 3. Let me just share this file with you really quick. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to start with computer vision. And essentially what we're going to be learning is something known as convolutional neural networks, which are things that are actually pretty much the most predominant model used for computer vision. So this is lab number 3. The chat box, you guys can see. All right, let's go back and let's start. All right. So what is computer vision? So computer vision is, as the name suggests, making computers do things that that are related to the human vision. We see different things, we see images, videos, things like that, and so it's a really cool thing to make neural networks actually see images. If you realize what we did till now was that we actually worked on some image data, but we actually converted it into completely deconstructed the entire image itself just to feed it into a neural network, the multi-layer perceptron model. The problem with multi-layer perceptron models is that it does not see pixels. Like how image has pixels, multi-layer perceptrons don't consider pixels. It only knows that there's a value and all of them are independent and all of them are fed as features into the model, and that's how multi-layer perceptrons work. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to design some models that can understand the concept of pixels, that can understand the concept of spatial distributions within images. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you have an image. Let's say I have an image of me. A single pixel, which is considered independent in the case of a multi-layer perceptron, does not make any sense. But a group of pixels makes sense. A group of pixels make my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my face. That's what's going to make a dog, a cat, a car, an aeroplane. So it's a pixel that makes sense. So a group of pixels must be looked at together. It should not be considered independent of each other. So to do that, we're going to learn something which is known as convolutional neural networks. Convolutional neural networks. All right, so before we start into that, let's do some basic bookkeeping. Let's download our data sets. Let's construct our data loaders. Stuff that we need anyways. It's nothing but like just the copied stuff from last lab. So anyways, I'm just going to start typing. I need torch vision, which contains my MNIST data set. There's the PyTorch library itself. From PyTorch, I need some. I mean, all neural network stuff is contained inside a sub module within the PyTorch library known as NN. We've used it last time as well. Oh, yeah, NN.linear, right? NN.module. Yeah, so this NN thing is like very important. It contains everything related to the neural network, and we don't want to write everything from scratch because PyTorch already provides it for us. So why write it from scratch again? And I need one more thing. I'll tell you the use for this, but just but within the all right, we'll do this later. Anyways, all right. Let me just uh, let me terminate this. All right, so let's start. So the same as before, I'm gonna download the MNIST. What do you call the images? I'm gonna have to download the training and the testing images separately. So dot vision dot datasets dot MNIST. What does it contain? Root is going to contain. What else? Train is equal to true. What else? Transform later. Download is equal to true. I need to download it. All right, and transform is equal to because it's gonna give me images directly, and I want tensors, and we've looked at it last time as well. I need to convert it into tensors first. So I'm gonna give it something known as a transform. And what it's gonna do is PyTorch is gonna apply the transform to every image separately. So it's gonna convert every image into a tensor, and that is within the uh, Torch Vision to tensor. Yep, here it is, and we looked at it last time as well, if you guys remember. Tensor. So it converts a PIL image, which is going to be the actual default image data, the default image that we're going to get, and it's going to convert it into tensor, which is actually the thing that is most useful to us because I mean we can't do anything with images. Computers don't understand images; they only understand numbers, matrices, tensors, stuff like that. So it's going to be simply torch vision dot transforms dot to tensor. Don't forget to initialize it because PyTorch actually thinks that we just give it a ready-made function. You need to initialize it before calling that class as a function. The testing is going to be similar to this. I'm just going to copy paste this. Going to be test. Download is equal to false, and everything remains the same. Yep. Sorry, train is equal to false. And let me just see like what do I get. So I'm just gonna go left and list train images. I hope it works. Yep, it works. 60,000 images in that, and let's see if how much is the length of the testing as well. Testing set as well. And next test images. Yep, 10,000 images in the testing set and 60,000 images in the training set. So this is the MNIST data set. Now, just give me a second. We're now done with the data set. What do we do? What do we need to do next? We need to convert it into a data loader, which if you guys remember, a very important concept. A data loader is nothing but a class which can, number one, divide your data into batches because sometimes you can't fit 60,000 images into a CPU directly. It's going to become very slow, or a GPU for that matter. On the second hand, it actually contains some convenient functions which can very easily put your you can iterate through your data very easily, and you can also put them onto the GPU, which. So first, I need to import the data loader library, which is contained in this thing. everything related to data structures, data set, data loader is contained within this torch.utils.data. Right? So we looked at two important submodules right now, torch.nn, which contains neural network functions, and torch.utils.data, which contains all data structures that we need, data loaders, data sets, for example. Import data loader. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert uh, the training data sets into data loaders, which is nothing but, which is as simple as this. Images, and I need to give it a batch size as well. So let's just do batch size is equal to 16, let's say, standard, same as last time. And the valid DL, I mean the testing data set or the valid data set. I mean, for small problems, if you remember, we discussed that they are essentially the same. You don't need to necessarily separate it into the testing data set and the validation and the what do you call training data set. So you need training data set and one more data set to actually understand how your model is working on your data. So we're going to call it validation data set, training data set. Though in theory, validation data set and testing data set are separate. So keep that in mind. Test images. Or let me, just for the sake of the argument, let me not confuse you guys. Let me just name to valid itself. Train images. Or not testing images. Valid. Oh, so it's not BS, it's batch size. Yeah, so this works. And so if you want to see how it works, you can just go how to iterate through this. I mean, like if you want to iterate through this data set, it's as simple as, just going across the data set like this. And you're going to see that you actually get X is going to be, just give me a second, guys. Which is, yeah. So you're going to see that we had images which was 1, 28, 28. One channel, 28 is the height, 28 is the length or width. And there are 16 images in a batch, right? So which is why this is the shape of your tensor, X tensor. All right, so we're done with the data loader. What's next? The CNN model itself, the convolutional neural network. So now we're done with everything that we need. We do need some things like, well, loss functions, accuracy and all, but we'll look at it. So we first need to define the architecture, right? So it's very important that whenever you guys are building model, make it systematic, right? First, get over with your data and your pre-processing stuff, then come to the architecture, then come to the loss function and your metrics, then come to the optimizer, because that's how training given input to a model which goes into a loss function on which the optimizer is applied. So it's much easier if you guys are clear like what you should do first and what you should do later. So we're gonna create the architecture over here. So let us actually learn what a convolutional neural network is. Now I'm gonna give you a very brief explanation of what convolutional neural networks are because it's not yet covered in class. So let's actually learn what convolutional neural networks are. All right. Convolutional neural network. Let me open a. Actually, let me just show you a good visualization. So I'm just looking for a good what do you call visualization for you guys. All right, so let me just show you something that I created a while back. Just give me a second. All right, so You understand that any images that you get, okay, so let's also before that, let's do one thing. Uh, where is it? All right, so yeah. So do you understand that whenever you have an image, and let's which is of the shape of 28, 28, it's actually a 2D map, something which looks like this, by the way. Like let's say there are pixels, some pixels on the zero axis, some pixels on the one axis, maybe some pixels on the second axis as well, which is the z axis, which is the number of channels. In this case, there is only one channel because it's black and white images of MNIST images. But these like, so there is a spatial distribution of the pixels. Do you guys understand that? What convolutional neural networks are is so convolutional neural networks are nothing but a variant of the neural network, which instead of considering each pixel independent, considers the relation between pixels as well. So if you guys look at this, do you see this dark blue box color over here? This dark blue color box. So there are 9 pixels all in a small square. And all of these squares are used together to do some sort of computation. And that is essentially the meaning of a convolutional neural network. It uses a mathematical concept known as convolution, which is nothing but, if there are, let's say, 10 different values or 9, so we have 9 different values considered at once. They all have some weight to it. So you go, so if you have x1, x2, x3 up till x9, you go w1 x1 plus w2 x2 plus w3 x3 up till w9 x9, which is by the way not the same as the one we did in neural networks last time. Let's just say that there are the w1 and through w9 have some values. When these guys are multiplied together and added together, that's known as a convolutional operation. It's a very common operation. So any of you guys who are studying signal processing or communication systems, you guys must have come across this concept. So the idea behind this is that, let's say you have this pixel map, which is, let's say, 5 by 5 over here. In our case, it's 28 by 28. Let's actually look at a small group of pixels around a place, because it's a group of pixels that makes sense, right? Group of pixels makes eyes, your nose, and stuff like that. And let's each multiply them using some predetermined values, which I've determined over here. Let's say 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, minus 1, minus 1, minus 1. All right. And for each of these 9 boxes, let's say in the initial spot, that is the 7, 4, 3, 2, 5, 3, 3, 3, 2, like this box of 9. Let me just correspondingly multiply each number and add them up. And let me just put them over here. So if you multiply the first box with this in this first position, you're going to get the value 6. Now, because I need to, cover the whole pixel map, I'm going to shift that window, a little bit to the right. I'm going to do the same thing. And so what essentially you're going to get with this is you're going to get another pixel map, which is slightly smaller than this because of course you have multiplied 9 values and clubbed them into one value. So this 5 by 5 pixel maps results in this 3 by 3 another pixel map, which has some values, and these values usually show some kind of properties. These are and you will see, and let me show you what it looks like. Here is a visualization that you can see. And you're going to see that what essentially these convolutions do is that they can identify initially very low level patterns, like straight lines, maybe a small curve. Is anyone seeing anything? All right, so maybe a small line, maybe an orange color, let's say. So if you see that here is I don't know, can you see? Yeah, I think you can see now. Initially, within the first layer, it's going to see very basic stuff, like maybe let's say a straight line and pink color and a green line together. The second layer is going to see even more complex stuff like, edges, and, it's going to specifically see that green and white club together, like over here. And maybe when you go to the third layer, it's going to, understand complex things like, circles and like, like what do you call stripes and stuff like that. Fourth layer, you can see that it can identify uh, the human eye or anything that looks like the human eye over here. Or maybe it can identify, let's actually go to even more complex layer. Now it can understand like what a arm looks like, what a human looks like. Look at this box over here. It can understand what flowers look like. It can understand what the tires of a car look like. So it can identify really complex patterns, and that's the job of a convolutional neural network. It's only possible because convolutional neural networks understand these spatial relations between different pixels. So just some, by the way, this is the person. His name is Jan LeCun. Here. So his name is Jan LeCun, and this guy was the guy who introduced convolution and who made convolutional neural networks really famous. And he's considered like one of the top three, let's say, AI gods, right besides Yoshua Bengio and Jeffrey Hinton. And these guys were the guys, who at the time when no one believed in deep learning, these guys did. And, they completely revolutionized what we call deep learning in general. So that's what a convolutional neural network is. So if you see, here is a nice GIF that explains, like how convolutional neural networks work. So you slide, you take this small window, or in computer language, computer vision language, it's called a kernel. So this window is called the kernel. And you slide this kernel across your pixel map, and you do your convolutions, which is nothing but weighted multiplications, and get another pixel map. And now what you can do is that you on that pixel map itself, you can do again those convolutions and come to the third layer, and it's going to identify even more complex layers. Is anyone saying anything? All right. By the way, you guys can call me Palash. You don't. I'm essentially just your. I'm a BTech student as well, by the way. And we're all learning together, so we're all friends over here, right? So, this is how you can slide through your pixel map and created features which which essentially can identify really complex visual patterns. And so you guys can see this is actually very much inspired by the human brain itself. The human brain also identifies patterns in different steps. All right, so enough about that. Let's code it up. All right. All right, so let me just define what do I need? All right, so let's define dev get CNN model. Right, CNN stands for convolutional neural networks. Convolutional neural networks. So let's actually just define this. And let me also say that the input size doesn't matter. So the image can be as big as it wants. Like, you need to define the number of classes that you need at the end, right? So for example, in our case, we're working on the MNIST dataset, which has 10 classes, 0 through 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to have to define, like, my architecture is going to depend on how many number of classes I have, because that's going to decide my final layer, which is that, which is a fully connected layer. A fully connected layer is nothing but, like the, what do you call it? A standard layer of the multi-layer perceptron. That's called a fully connected layer. So that's just used to differentiate between a convolutional layer and a fully connected and a multi-layer perceptron type of layer. All right, I'm going to say num classes. I'm going to give it a default value of 10. Right. The first thing I'm going to do is just some bookkeeping. That is, I'm going to Make sure that a person does not enter a float over here or a negative value or something like that, because that does not make sense. So I'm just gonna write an assert function. Assert, we learned about assert within lab 0 as well as lab 2. So assert none classes uh, greater than 0 and type none classes equal to int. Yeah, sorry. All right, so that's done. All right, so let's let's actually define the model itself. Now for that, I'm going to use something. So I'm actually um, within the second lab, we actually defined our layers separately, and we defined the forward function separately. We actually can do that over here, but I don't want to do this because we've already learned how to do this. So we're gonna see how to do this using PyTorch functions, because that's because no one expects you to write this from scratch every time. PyTorch already provides you with an API, and you should actually absolutely use that. So I'm gonna teach you about something known as nn.sequential, which is nothing but a nice function which in which you can pass in your layers directly. So for example, this is, by the way, the convolutional function that we're going to use, and I'm going to tell you the how it works. The ReLU function, we've already seen this, and I'm going to pass in all my layers with commas, and it's essentially going to construct this function over here for you without all the hassle of writing the entire code. So all you need to do is you need to pass this as the input, and it's going to return you this entire class. That's the job of nn.sequential. So I'm gonna go with return nn.sequential, and the first thing that you need to do is just in case that anyone passes the data as and I like to do this usually, and it's a good practice to do this, is to first pass in a function that first reshapes the image into whatever is required. So by the way, this is the shape that you need. Now you don't need to convert it into a flattened shape, which as we did last time. Like if you remember, we kind of just multiplied all of these together and we just basically put them in a straight row. We don't need to do that because now convolutional neural networks are capable of finding spatial relations. They are capable of finding relations between pixels in a particular place. So we don't need to flatten them. We can directly pass in, but just in case anyone passes a flattened model, our model should be able to convert it into this kind of shape. So I'm going to write a function over here which is going to flatten this. And so right, I can't directly define a function, by the way, because if you remember that everything in PyTorch, every function needs to be a class. So I'm just going to create a dummy class over here, which I call Lambda. By the way, Lambda is a very standard name for any function in Python, so that's why I'm using it. And it's a child of nn.module. We've already defined these kind of things. Like if you remember, like the model itself was a child of nn.module. Why? Because nn.module contains things like add module and stuff like that, and we don't want to write add module from scratch, honestly, to be fair. And also nn.module keeps track of your parameters and your what all needs to be learned, what all needs to be ignored. So it's always a good idea to import whatever neural network function you need from nn.module. And this is by the way, generic function. It's nothing but a function which is gonna be a class which is the object version of any function. So when I'm saying that I want to reshape my my input, even though I'm going to define a function, but I'm going to pass it to this Lambda class, and it's going to become a class now. And so I can use that class how I used before, right? So this is nothing but, so of course, self goes first, and then the function itself, right? Func. Right. And very important, whenever you import from nn.module, it's very important to initialize the nn.module as well. So I'm going to do this. This is a very standard step. Always do this. And I'm going to store the function as is. And I'm just going to go now. I'm going to go with def forward, which is needed by every nn.module, what do you call, class. Def forward is nothing but which is used to, that is, forward is basically the function that through which you can use the object, the class, as a function itself. So if you remember, MLP model is a class, right? And we initialized it over here. But over here, you saw that I was using that class as a function itself. I could pass in certain inputs, and that was only possible because I defined something known as def forward, which tells that if you want to use it as a function, you're going to pass in an x, it's going to do something, and it's going to return that x. That's the job of forward, and that's only specific for nn.module, by the way. So I need to define that forward. It's going to take an input, and all it's going to do is that it's going to return self.func x. So it's just going to return the value that the function provides to it. One more thing. You see, the nn.module also gives you some really cool stuff, which is like this visualization stuff. So whenever you use a lambda, it's always important that there is some way to visualize that as well. So otherwise, you're gonna get confused whenever a lambda is used. So for that, you need to use another dunder method. By the way, these double underscore methods are called dunder methods, and it's called self.repr, which means that basically what's happening over here is that these things, these strings, these are basically strings, and these are actually defined, like these are actually contained within something known as def repr and dunder repr. And so what dunder repr does is basically whenever you want to print or visualize something like that, PyTorch internally goes to that dunder repr and asks, like, what string do you want to display? And in this case, it basically told that I want to display this. Yeah, and so PyTorch was like, okay. So whenever a person says model, I'm going to display this from now on. So that is the job of dunder repr, and I'll show you how it works. Anyway, so I'm going to return a string. Basically says lambda str self.func self.func dot. Let's just see how it works. By the way, just give me a second. Let's say a is equal to lambda, and or let's define a function, lambda x 2 times x. So it's a function that returns twice the x. Let's see, whenever you just type a, it's going to tap into the dunder repr. And so so this, sorry. What's missing x? Oh, of course. Str self.func. That's a problem with the lambda function. Sorry. Let me define a function as such. The def twice x return 2 times x. And I'm going to say a is equal to lambda twice Let me just say A. All right. Anything. Okay, yeah. So I haven't defined a. Okay, I got it now. So self.func, if you're gonna tap into self.func, it's gonna give you this. So I think this is good enough. I mean, if you want to visualize anything, and we're gonna see that whenever, because we're gonna be defining custom functions, and so this is not gonna be a problem, and as we're gonna see. So that's how dunder repro works, by the way. Let me just try one more thing. All right. So what I did over here was always gonna give me this. I'm like, this is gonna be one word, and then there's gonna be a space, and there's gonna be this. So I basically know that this is gonna be the format of all this lambda function. And what you can do is now you can basically divide that string, because this is essentially just a string. And you can divide it using these spaces, and you can say that whatever is the second word, which is at index number 1, just print that. So I did that, and yeah, that worked. All right, so we're done with that. Let's come back to, so this is rather the lambda function, which is nothing but a very generic function, generic class of the nn.module class. So what you need to do now is you're going to have to define two functions. One is def mnist resize, which is whatever shape you get, all you need to do is you're going to return x.view -1, 1, 28, 28. So it's gonna essentially whatever is gonna come as the input, it's gonna reshape it in the form of 1, 28, 28. And -1 is basically like, it handles every other number, like the like amount of images in a batch or any other number. For example, it's gonna basically say like -1 takes care of all of that. And so yeah, that's essentially the job of that. All right, so I'm done with that. I'm going to define the second function later. So the first thing that I need to do is whatever I'm gonna get, I need to pass it through a lambda function, a lambda mnist resize, by the way. That's my first. So that's going to make sure that my input is of the shape x.view. And now I need to start with my convolutional layers. And so what we essentially saw over here was a 2D convolution, because the pixel map itself was 2D in nature. Now, there do exist things like 3D convolutions, 4D convolutions. And it's very intuitive. If your pixel map is like three-dimensional, like for example, videos are basically three-dimensional data. You need 3D convolutions for that. If you have four-dimensional data, which is, let's say you have 3D data, like nowadays you have 3D data sets, and that itself is temporal in nature. So it's going to be a 4D data set. For that, you need 4D convolutions, for example. So now I'm gonna pass in. So I need the 2D convolution over here, and that's essentially contained in something known as nnconv2d. And it takes certain inputs, and we're gonna see it takes the number of channels as the input and number of channels that need to go out. And I'm gonna tell you what that means. Let me just show you. Essentially, the first layer contains only one channel. So that's going to be the input, by the way. So there are one input channel. By the way, we don't need to specify this shape to the PyTorch library, because, I mean, like, anyways, it's a sliding library, right? The only thing that matters over here is, where is it? The only thing that matters is the size of this small window or the kernel, right? So, and it's going to traverse through whatever amount of shape of data you have, right? Whatever shape of data you have. So you don't need to specify 28, 28, but you do need to tell PyTorch that, there is one channel that I need to work on. So it's going to create only one channel. The kernel is going to have only one channel, right? Because that's the only way you can, piece by piece multiply each value with each other. You can't multiply a one channel pixel map with a two channel kernel, right? So they need to be of the same shape, And now what you can do is that the output is not necessarily supposed to be only one. And what people actually do is, yeah, this is a good visualization. So there's actually, let's say one over here, let's say there are 3 channels over here. And so what you can do is that you can tell PyTorch that instead of just one channel as the output, I want, let's say, 10 channels as the output. And what's that essentially going to mean? That there are going to be 10 different kernels that are going to be running parallelly on the same data. And they're going to produce 10 different outputs, which are going to be clubbed together, and they're going to become a separate data pixel map with, let's say, 10 different channels and certain amount of height and width, for example. And what these channels essentially represent are different sorts of features. So it's for example, one sort of pixel map may be very good at identifying horizontal layers. One sort of pixel map output may be good at like predicting vertical maps. Some may be good at predicting the color orange. Some may be good at predicting I don't know, like these kind of things, like where anywhere where there is white and slightly black over here. So that's how, by the way, traditional facial recognition used to work. There used to be this thing known as the something Jones algorithm, if you guys know. Anyways, so these multiple output channels are going to represent different features of your image data. So you need to define that. And so I'm going to go with 1 as the input. Out channels, which are highlighted over here in the box above, it's going to be, let's say, 8. That's for example. I need to define the kernel size, which is nothing but the size of this sliding window over here, this kernel over here, right? And so traditionally in computer vision, I mean, usually you use only a 3x3 kernel mostly, but it's actually a convention. In the first layer itself, you use a 5x5 or a 7x7 pixel. And the reason why you do that is because you want to increase the because usually input images are so large. I mean, sometimes you have images which are like 1080 pixels by 1080 pixels, which is a very huge pixel map. So you want to increase the receptive field of the convolutional neural network. You want your convolutional neural network to identify, and what essentially a 1080p by 1080p pixel image means, that an eye, for example, is going to be something like, let's say, 100 by 100 pixels, for example. And so a 5x5, a 3x3 kernel may not be able to, identify what do you call, the entire eye itself. And so we want to increase the kernel size just in the first layer itself, just so that it can, cover much more information within the pixels itself. It doesn't make sense to increase it to 100 by 100. I mean, the kernel size should not be 100 by 100 in any case. Apparently, experiments show that does not work. But a 5x5 and a 7x7 usually work. 5x5 over here. The kernel size is going to be 5. A few other things, stride, for example, I'm going to tell you what that is. Stride is equal to 2, padding is equal to 2. What stride is basically, you remember how I told you about 1080p by 1080p pixels? Now, because I mean the image is so large, and the one eye itself, let's say for example, takes 100 by 100 pixels. You don't need all of that information. I mean, like in 100 by 100, there are about 10,000 different values. You don't need 10,000 different values to represent an eye. You can basically work with less amount of data. And so Jan LeCun, this person, in his original paper back in 1989, which showed convolutional neural networks, actually demonstrated that what you can do is that instead of sliding the kernel by just 1 pixel to the right or 1 pixel to the down, you can basically take strides. You can basically skip by 2 pixels, for example. And what that is going to look like is going to look like something like that. Let me just go to Google Images for you guys. And I need a GIF. Oh, there's a good one. So look at this. If there was no stride happening, you would basically be shifting the kernel by just 1 pixel. But whenever there is stride, you're going to be basically shifting every pixel by 2 pixels now. Yeah. So that's the job of what do you call a stride. Now I defined also something known as padding, which is nothing but basically you see how this 5 by 5 pixel map is now reduced to a 3 by 3 pixel map. Now if you now I'm gonna pass it through another 3 by 3 convolution, and 3 by 3 multiplied by 3 by 3 is gonna give me 1 by 1. So just one value, and now I can't do convolutions any further. So you need to make sure, you need to somehow compensate for this reducing size, because at one point it's just going to vanish and you're not going to have anything else. So the way to do that is you actually add certain pixels in the very edge of the pixel map itself. What that is going to look like is, how you see how this original 5 by 5 pixels, now you basically add certain values to the around that pixel. So you put it inside a blanket, or you pad. That's where the word padding comes from. So you pad certain pixels in order to augment the size of the output pixel, and you can give them any default value. By default, it's 0. I mean, 0 is the most conventional values, but you can do anything else. I mean, there are a few other methods to do padding, like reflective padding, which is basically let me show you different types of padding. Types of padding, CNN. Yeah. So there is a visualization. There are no good visualizations, but what you can do is that you can put in either zeros, either ones, or you can put in white pixels or black pixels. What you can do is you can fill it with, like let's say wherever an image is, you just do a sort of reflection across that point, and it's going to give you reflective padding as well. So that exists. Anyways, by default, it's going to be zeros, and that works usually well. So padding basically means that for every, if I'm going to do a stride of 2, I'm going to have to add in 2 padding layers at the end, which means that one on the left side, one on the right side. So I'm going to and one on the top, 2 at the bottom. So it's going to augment the shape by 4 pixels on each axis, and that's used to compensate the reducing size of convolutions. All right, that's done. uh, so this is actually equivalent to the normal linear layer. It's just a variant of that. After that, it's simply nn.relu. All right, nn dot. Let me do another convolution, for example. And so now you see that the output over here was 8 channels, so the input over here needs to be 8 channels. And usually, what you do is that you keep on increasing the number of channels, because that's how neural networks learn to do more and more complex things. So 8 becomes 16, 16 becomes 32, 64. You keep on increasing the channels until the very end point where where we'll see like what to do. And so all right, now the kernel size is going to be 3 standard from now on. 3 by 3 kernel is the most standard thing, and it works really well. People are seeing it. Stride stride of 2 works, and padding can be 1. Oh, just a second. Yeah, padding can be 1. Another nn.relu, maybe another convolutional neural network, another convolution. I'm gonna go with 32 inputs. Sorry, oh, mistake. Oh, sorry. 16 inputs and 32 outputs, for example. Oh no. 32 outputs. Kernel size of 3, stride of 2, padding of 1. Very standard values, by the way. Again, nn.relu. Maybe another convolutional neural network, convolutional layer. 32 input channels, and it's actually just 32 output channels itself, because it doesn't make, because it's a very small data set, it doesn't make sense to, because I mean the images itself are 28 by 28. So your it's a good thumb of rule to not exceed the number of channels beyond, much beyond the actual height or width of the image itself. Because what that means is that yeah, that's a sign of overfitting. Yeah. So 28 is the actually height or width. So 32, we should actually stop at 32. A kernel size of 3, 2, 1, and stride of 2, and padding of 1. Just have some water. By the way, how many of you guys are?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can you explain this part again? What's it called? Channels. I didn't
What
get
part?
channels. Like, what exactly is channel and how it's different from kernel?
All right, all right, all right. Okay. Uh, do you understand that images have channels? For example, like a normal image has like 3 channels by default, red, blue, and green. Do you
Yes,
get
yes.
that one? Uh, Palash, you can call me Palash. Um, in our case, we have only one channel. So channel is nothing but actually the third dimension within your data itself, right? So the first dimension is height, second dimension is width, third dimension is channels. Anyway, what essentially happens is that once you the problem with, let's say, over here we had only one dimension channel, so the output is going to be one dimension itself. It's going to be one channel itself. I'm very sorry. So by default, let's say for example, input was one channel, and the output also has one channel only, right? Richard, do you get that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now the problem with so this kernel through which we are actually multiplying, which is, this is actually the sliding window which we are actually moving ahead and multiplying with each thing. This represents one specific character, and this, for example, 111 000 -1 -1 -1. This, for example, this particular kernel is good at identifying horizontal lines, for example. But it's only good at identify horizontal lines. It can identify nothing else at once. All right. So what essentially is going to happen? The output is going to look something like. Uh,
So does it mean like when we had the first layer, they were like a single channel in our input image, and we said that we want 8 channels out of it. So there would be 8 kernels that will
exactly.
slide.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And now what's
Okay.
going to happen is that each of these kernels are going to have different properties. One of them is going to identify horizontal lines, like for example this one. Yeah. This one over here identify horizontal lines. There is one which identify vertical. Sorry, this is going to identify vertical lines. One of them is going to identify horizontal lines. One of them is going to identify diagonal lines. One of them is going to identify the color blue. One of them is going to identify the color white. One of them is going to identify round shapes, for example. So you can either manually design these kernels, but we're going to leave that to the neural network to identify. So by the way, just as in our normal linear layers, the weights and the bias used to be our parameters. In this case, these 9 values within the kernel is actually the learnable parameter. So we're gonna tell the neural network that learn whatever feature you want to learn. Whatever gives you the best result, give me that feature. So it's gonna identify that, okay, maybe a vertical line is gonna help me good. So I should probably change these 9 values accordingly. Maybe so it's going to try random things, and it's going to say that, okay, maybe, well, the color, let's say black gives me good results, for example. So it's going to identify, it's going to change the values accordingly. So that's essentially the meaning of having different output channels. And whenever there's going to be one input channel, I give 8 different output channels. That means that I'm trying to identify 8 different features of my data. Yeah, one of them is going to be where do you think there's going to be straight lines? Where do you think there's going to be what do you call less lines. By the way, I'll also tell you how it works. Wherever in the pixel there's going to be horizontal line, right? Uh, and if you give and if you multiply it with a kernel which identifies horizontal line, the value is going to be very high. And if there is not a horizontal line, and if you multiply it with a kernel which is made to identify to a horizontal line, it's gonna give a very low value. So that is how neural networks identify where there are like let's say vertical lines, where there are not vertical lines. That is basically what it does. So basically, 6 is a very high value correspond like in comparison to other values. So it means that this window over here, 7 2 3 4 5 3 3 3 2, this contains vertical lines if you actually plot it. But if you shift it slightly and you're going to get a value of -9, that means that there is no vertical line over there. So that's how kernels actually work, by the way. And what you can do after that is that after the first, like once you're gonna get those 8 output channels, you're gonna actually take all of those 8 input channels together, and you're gonna take, let's say, 16 output channels to that. So 8 output channels will now give you 16 different features, which are gonna represent even more complex features like round shapes or like tires of a wheel or let's say flowers, human faces, stuff like that, as we saw over here, by the way. Um, so layer number 1 could identify just straight lines, for example, or the color orange and blue, for example. Layer number 2 can identify circles or stripes, stuff like that. Layer number 3 can identify even more complex things like honeycomb structures, or like it's starting to identify human faces over here. It's starting to identify shapes which are shaped like the human eye, by the way. Layer number 4 can actually identify really more complex things, like like even more complex things. Layer number 5 can identify even more complex things, until you can identify very complex things like difference between uh, I don't know, Keira Knightley and Natalie Portman, which are like doppelgangers, for example. So yeah, it can identify really complex things like that. Yeah, so I took in one input channel, given out 8 output channels. That again went into as the input to another convolutional neural network, which gave me 16 output channels. 16 became 32. 32, I'm not going beyond 32 because it doesn't make sense. And nn.relu is very important. nn.relu. Right. Now here what you need to do is that every convolutional neural network actually ends up as a normal fully connected layer. A fully connected layer is nothing but that linear layer which has some W, some B, and you multiply W times X plus B. That's called a linear layer or a fully connected layer. So we need some way to convert this pixel map back into a fully connected layer, because actually, if you think about it, let me go back to lab 2. So you see this final layer, that contains some inputs and contains 10 output features, which is actually the number of outputs that I want, which is because I have 10 different classes. So this is actually a very handy function for me. So I need some way to convert this final pixel map of 32 channels, um, and convert it into a linear layer. And so one way to do that is simply, like reshape that 2D pixel map into, let's say, 1D pixels, and feed it into a linear layer directly. But before that, you must remember that there are 32 channels. So how do we deal with those 32 channels? You need to, because linear layer can only take one value at one node. It can't take 32 different channels value. So you need some way to condense those 32 channels first. Once you do that, we're gonna get, like, let's say, one single channel 2D pixel map, and that we can reshape into something that we can directly feed into a linear layer. So the first thing to do is, the way we actually get rid of those 32 channels and actually come up with only one channel is we take an average across all of those 32 channels. And that actually works well because, I mean, we're going to assume that By the time you reach, let's say you're so deep into the network where you've actually gone through 4 different convolutional layers, you can identify such complex features which can, let's say one pixel is going to have some values like, let's say the top left corner has some characteristic of fluffiness of a dog, or let's say skin tone, or let's say the hairiness. I've got some hair, so how much amount of hair does it have? Second feature is going to be something else. Third feature is going to be something else, and these are essentially just mathematical values. If that feature exists, it's going to give you a high value. If that feature doesn't exist, it's going to give you a low value. If you take an average across them, it's going to give you a good indication of how important that pixel is for your predictions. By the way, whichever is going to be a high value is actually going to be useful for us for our predictions, by the way. So an average is a good indicator of saying like how useful that feature is for your feature prediction. So I'm going to do something known as nn.adaptive average pool 2D. And it takes in one as the input, which basically says that I want one output out of whatever number of channels you have. So if you have 32 channels, condense them into one channel. So that's what it's going to do. After that, I have a 2D pixel map, which I need to. So by the way, let's imagine I have now the output after this was 32 times 28 times 28 or whatever. For example. I have now after this I've reduced this to 1 times 28 times 28 because I've taken an average across all the 32 channels. And now I need to convert this 28 by 28 into a single tensor. So a 2D tensor needs to be made into a 1D tensor in order to feed it into a linear layer. That's essentially what we did over here, if you remember. I mean, it took certain inputs, it gave me certain outputs, but before that, I needed to actually reshape it into a size of 28 by 28, which is 784 pixels lined up in a single tensor, and that was fed into what you call the linear layer. So I need to do essentially that itself. So it's called flatten. This function is called flatten, and I'm gonna define, let's say, another function over here which says f flatten x return x dot view -1 comma um, uh, or uh, okay, let's just do. So the thing is that I want to make it as flexible as possible. Let's say that there are 16 batches and like 16 images in the batches are total. That remains the same. We can't change that. So I'm gonna pass in that into my view function, which is gonna be x dot shape 0, which is gonna be the very first index, which is 16 or whatever, depending on how much images are there. And what I'm gonna do is that now I'm gonna put a -1 over here, which is gonna say that whatever remaining number of functions, remaining number of pixels there are, just multiply all of those and like give me an appropriate number. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna say that let's say my input x originally was 16 times 1 times 28 by 28, and I mentioned that my output needs to have 16 in the very first place. And I put a -1 over here. -1 basically means that I'm going to tell PyTorch that just take care of whatever else dimensions are there. So it's going to say that, well, there are 3 dimensions and only one placeholder over here. So the only way to actually, make it compatible is to multiply all these values. PyTorch does this internally, by the way. So it's going to do 1 times 28 by 28. And the reason why I actually I did hard code 1 times 28 times 28 is because, like, what happens if my input, like the size of the input changes? Like, what if I give it a 1080p pixel by 1080p pixel image? That I mean, this is not going to be able to handle that, and I'm going to have to like rewrite this function again and again, which is not convenient. I mean, this works very well. And again, I'm going to pass it through the Lambda function because it needs to get class. So lambda flatten. And after that, I'm just going to pass it through a linear layer, which basically takes in I did a mistake. I'm very sorry. So, by the way, average should not be done across all the channels because channels contain independent features, right? Features may or may not be correlated, but our values within one pixel map are correlated together. So they need to be averaged, and the pixels need to be considered separate. My bad. I'm very sorry. So what this will do over here is it's gonna say that. So adaptive average pooling is gonna give me 1 times 32 times 1 times 1, right? And that I'm gonna flatten over here. So what? So I'm gonna give it an. So by the way, sorry, 16 times. 16 times 32 times 1 times 1, right? And so over here I'm gonna get an input of 16 times 32 times 1 times 1. And I'm going to tell PyTorch that the first placeholder needs to have a shape of 16. That's good. And the remaining needs to be taken care of. And it's basically going to go 32 times 1, which is 32. So the input now needs to be of 32 channels because there are 32 values. And num classes, by the way, which is, by the way, whatever amount of numbers there is over here. So in num classes. That's it. That's a model. That's a convolutional neural network model, and let's see if that's working. Hope it works. Yeah. So x equal to next iter ABL. I'm just gonna go model is equal to get CNN model x dot shape. Torch.nn has no attribute. Okay, so must have made some mistake. Uh, so yeah, I did a capital D over here. It's supposed to be a small d. Yeah, I think this should work. Yeah, it works. So I gave it an input of 16 times 1 times 28 by 28. 16 inputs in a batch, 16 images in a batch. Each image is 1 times 28 by 28. And the output is supposed to be 10 different values, right? Because there are 16 images and 10 different values corresponding to the activations of each different classes. It's actually just printed as well. What my model actually thinks right now is that each image, there are 16 values, by the way, each value contains 10 different values. Whichever is going to be the highest value, the model is going to predict that as the answer. So here I'd say 0.15. Yep, 0.15 seems to be the most value. So my model is going to say that 1 is my answer because this is index 0, this is index 1. So my model is going to say that 1 is your answer. That the model right now thinks that the image is 1. This may or may not be true because we have not trained the model yet. Anyways, I'm going to remove this. So it takes up extra space. Now, this is the same as before. And now what I need to do is I've defined my model architecture. Now I need to define my loss functions. It's going to be the same. So I'm just going to copy paste what we call these things over here. It's the same as before, same as last time. By the way, I hope you guys are practicing these notebooks over these 2 weeks, because I mean these are really important concepts, and I mean like there is no other way to understand these unless you actually practice them on your own. Trust me, you're not going to be able to understand through these just by looking at this thing. Optimizer is going to be the same. Okay, so optimizer is the same over here. I need to define the accuracy function. which is the same as before. So I'm just copy pasting that over. Accuracy works. What else do we need? Let's see. This pre-process function. Pre-process actually used to do two things. Number one, it used to reshape it into a 1D tensor. And the second thing, it used to normalize the data, which we also looked at, like why it was important. The problem is that right now we don't actually have to, what do you call, like reshape it into a 1D tensor. It can actually work within a 2D tensor as well. So I'm just going to comment it out. That is going to work. And now all I need to do is that same deep learning function is going to come into play, by the way. Right, so let me see if there's anything missing. I hope it works actually. This is going to change. Let me just put in, because I've already defined a model. Optimizer is optim. Oh, okay. Oh, loss function is that, and let's see if it works. Sorry, it's valid DL is not test here. It's a little slow because we have not yet added it to the GPU, which we're going to look at it later on, I think within this class itself. But I think it should work. It's a little bit slow. Let's just hope with it. That's okay. Yeah, so look at it. When we first use the MLP model, oh, by the way, if you remember, when we first used the linear regression model, we were at what, 63% accuracy? Then we used the multi-layer perceptron model, in which the first epoch itself, we got around 90% accuracy. Now using a CNN model, within the first epoch itself, we're getting 95% accuracy. So you see like how we have now improved the accuracy, so slowly increasing the accuracy. So it's really an amazing thing, like how convolution neural networks can work so well. While this is training, let me actually tell you some really cool things about convolution neural network. Why like convolution neural networks have now become like kind of the standard thing for images, like anything which is related to images, 3D images, videos and all, anything visual data has to be done using convolution neural networks. I mean, there is nothing else that works as good as convolution neural networks, which is really crazy because I'm like, given that AI is such a fast moving field, something that was introduced back in 1989 is still like so relevant. Like this actually tells us, like there are a few things that don't lose their touch and like which are still as effective as they can be. That nothing can beat them. So why does convolution neural networks work good on images and not multi-layer perceptrons? I mean, by the way, 95% accuracy is a good accuracy for like a multi-layer perceptron. I'm not saying that it's not. By the way, the maximum accuracy we reached was around 94. I'd say 95% was the max. But over here, by the way, we've reached 97% accuracy already, by the way. So why do, and you're gonna see that when you can pass in bigger images or more complex data, multi-layer perceptrons don't work well. I mean, they're gonna shit on your model. They're gonna completely destroy your accuracies and stuff like that. Convolutional neural networks, on the other hand, will work. Why do you think that convolution neural network work and multi-layer perceptrons don't work? It's only because of the thing that I explained to you that, like pixel. So convolution neural networks are good at identifying relations between pixels, because in images, a single pixel has no significance at all. But a group of pixels does. It's a group of pixels that makes a human eye. It's a group of pixels that makes a dog. A group of pixels that makes the nose. A group of pixels which makes, I don't know, this pen over here. A group of pixels which makes. You're reading the text on my screen. It's actually a group of pixels. An individual pixel does not make any sense. A group of pixels makes the letter E, P, O, C, H, 1, VALID. So you get my point. So multi-layer perceptron models actually consider each pixels independently. They don't consider the relations. Convolutional neural networks do that, and that is why convolutional neural networks work well. So that's actually a good interview question. I mean, it's a very standard interview question I've seen. So I mean, like, just remember this. Anyways, so I'm gonna take a break now, a small break now, and we're gonna continue after that. What we're gonna do after that is we're gonna implement more complex models like the Resnet architecture and stuff like that. So before that, let's actually take a small break. Let's meet at 12:35. If that is okay with you guys.
Yeah.
All right. So see you guys, and you guys can either take a break or you can just go through this notebook itself. So let's see you guys at 12:35. Um, so hi everyone back. Let's continue. There's a question in the chat box which I'll answer, and hopefully maybe someone who left may come out back. I'll just give them an extra 1 or 2 minutes. So Ruchir asks, isn't the accuracy supposed to increase or remain constant, or can it go bad as well? The answer to that is yes, it can go bad as well, and that's a really common problem in machine learning. But by the way, this is not an example of going bad. Because the problem with so welcome back, guys. Whoever's joining late, we haven't started yet. I'm just answering a question that was in the chat box. Um, this I wouldn't consider going bad. I mean, like you're talking about like 97.3 becomes 97.1 in the next step. That is not necessarily called going bad. And going bad, I mean, you clearly see patterns which are like 97.3 to 92 and then 85 and then stuff like that. That happens a lot, and that's a common problem in, let's say, I don't know, overfitting. That happens a lot, and that's called a problem called overfitting, which you continuously see the validation accuracy going down. This is, by the way, just a result of some amount of variation. I mean, the problem is that we've kind of like reached the peak 97.4, and so if you remember lab 1, where we'll actually learn gradient descent, and you must have learned this in class as well. Once it reaches the optimal, it kind of keeps on, like, just going back and forth across the minima. So which is why because of that some amount of randomness, it keeps on going slightly up and slightly down. But I mean, this is kind of, I'd say that it is constant. It's not called going bad. But yes, models can go bad, and that's a very common problem. And the number one reason for that is overfitting, which you have learned in class as well, and which we've discussed in lab as well. I hope you know what that means, or do you want me to explain? All right, great. So we finished the basics of convolutional neural networks, and let's actually now look at more complex networks. For that, more complex networks require, I mean, because we actually were working on very small data sets, it doesn't make sense to actually use the same data set, the MNIST data set, on a very large network, because essentially it doesn't make sense, right? And I'll tell you what's going to happen. Let's say, like, what happens essentially is that whenever you do some sort of padding, I mean, padding is a good way to compensate for like the reducing size of images. But I mean, essentially what happens is that, where is that? Anyways, if you remember that 5 by 5 becomes 3 by 3, and on top of that you add a padding, which is an artificial padding. So essentially in the resulting 5 by 5 image, only a 3 by 3 square is actually what comes out of an image directly, right? And the remaining part is artificially added layers, which actually may or may not have any meaning. I mean, if you simply add 0 values, it doesn't have any meaning as such. And then 3 by 3 will become 1 by 1, and the remaining pixels will become the result of padding. And so essentially you're kind of reducing the information that comes from the original image. So which is why that small data usually does not do well for like really large networks. And so if you have very small data, it's actually a good idea to just use smaller networks. Uh, anyways, uh, so for this, I'm actually going to use more bigger data as well. So data which is actually of bigger size. So that actually makes much more sense if you want to use complex data. So we can actually do that. And so for that, I'm actually going to teach you one more thing, which is actually how to build a custom data set very easily. And it uses something which is known as web scraping, which means that, I mean, it's not the same as, collecting the data yourself, going with a camera and clicking pictures. But like, what if you want to actually create a data set from the web itself? Like, want to create images from the web itself. So I think last year I came across this tool called JMD Image Scraper. I'm going to share in the there as well. And let me just open this, putting it in the chat box, and I'm putting it in the notebook as well. Creating custom datasets. Good tool for web scraping. Or JMD image scraper. And this is a good tool to like create your custom datasets. Was created by this person called Joe Dockrell. Wonderful guy. He's created some wonderful tools, by the way. And so what essentially you can do is that you can just pass in certain keywords, and it's gonna go to the website, to the internet. It's gonna collect certain pictures, and it's gonna create a data set for you. It's a very handy tool. Let's just install it first. Pip install GMD scraper. Right, pip install GMD scraper. What else? Let me just copy this. And let me come over here. Root is basically the folder in which your data is going to be stored. And let's actually build a cats versus dogs classifier. I mean, it's a good exercise. So let's just cats. I mean, by the way, this is going to be the name of your folder. By the way, this is going to be the query which is going to. So what this tool does is actually uses a search engine known as DuckDuckGo, which is actually a nice server, which is or web browser, which is actually used to scrape or actually search things anonymously. And it actually has a very good API apparently. So, and let me just use 200 images, let's say, for example, and I'm going to do the same for dogs as well. So dogs. And the query is going to be dogs as well. Let's run this. Yeah, so it's downloading images for me now, and we're going to visualize this as well. Let me go back, while it's downloading, let me go back to the GMD image scraper. And this tool actually also has a nice image cleaning property, because a lot of the times, you're going to type in a cat and it's going to give you a different result. Like, let's say, for example, a phone case with a cat made on it, or a dog is going to give you a result of, let's say, I don't know, something which is not essentially a dog. So you need to actually do some sort of cleaning as well, and this guy actually gives you a nice tool to do that as well. So yeah, downloading is done. Let me run the image cleaner as well, which I just directly copy pasted from there. Yeah, look at this. Let me just see that the label is cat. All of these do look like cats. Let me go to the next page. These all are cats. Okay, I'm not really sure, so let me just delete this. I mean, it can affect my model accuracy to some bit. Yep, this I'm really confused. Doesn't even look like a cat. So Prabhav says, can we use the Bing image search tool for getting the web images? Well, I mean, you need to generate an API key. You need to sign up to those Amazon Web Services or the Microsoft services. And it only stays active for 7 days. Not recommended. Sorry. So I mean, the reason, I mean, the why I am actually like giving you tips to these is because like I've actually done research as to like which is the best for you guys, and like so I mean, in my experience, this works really well. So web scraping, these tools like something like GMD image scraper are the best, and these are actually made by people in the community itself. Like this isn't something made by a company or as such. So it's open source. It doesn't use like, so the reason why Google API you can't, so why the reason it uses something known as a DuckDuckGo is because like Google is paid, Amazon Web Services has to be paid for, Bing is paid for. This is completely free because DuckDuckGo is also open source, by the way. So that's the power of open source, by the way. I'm not sure about this. Maybe I can remove this. Let's go to the next page. Yeah, all seems like cats. This, okay, is a cat. I can leave this. Okay. I'm not sure about this. I'm going to remove this. So, in order to build strong data sets, the ground truth must be very strong. I mean, you cannot afford errors within your ground truth itself because the model cannot reach 100% accuracy ever. So, if your ground truth itself contains some labels, you're going to be propagating bias, and you're going to get more error in your what do you call it, your final results. Uh, yep, this is not a cat. This is some sort of Photoshop stuff. I'm going to remove this. Anyway, so you can keep on doing this. It's a good exercise for you to go on. I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Let's just actually see the organization of our data. Very important before you do this. So I created a folder known as images. Now, if I just go within that images itself, and it's going to contain cats and dogs, two separate folders, cats and dogs. I can go within images slash cats. And let's, it's gonna give me what all images I have. And so you can see over here I have images, separate JPG files, which are basically my data sets. I can basically open them. You can visualize them on your own. All right. Anyways, I need to create. So these are only images, and I need to create a data set out of them. The problem with data sets is that data set. I mean, not a problem. Data set is actually a different structure altogether, right? So let's actually look at how to build a data set in terms of Python. Like, what does a data set mean computationally, right? So we're gonna build a data set. Code wise. Like, this is technically a data set, but it's not. You can't use it directly. So what essentially is a data set? A data set is nothing but a Python class. First of all, end of story. It contains two or three separate things. It contains two or three separate properties. One of them is it has something known as X. It has two different attributes. One is X and one is Y. Right? And it contains two methods. One is len, which is how you can identify. You can directly do len of the data set, and it's going to give you what do you say the length of the data set. It's very important. That's what the data loader also requires. Len is one method. The second thing that it needs is a get item, which basically means that whenever you do something like um, list. Sorry, by the way. Yep. So whenever you do so, you have a list. Let's say, for example, L is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when you say L1, whenever you do this kind of indexing using a square bracket, what Python is internally doing is that it's accessing something known as dunder get item. So we're gonna define that, and using that is how you get access to certain values. So this is essentially just a data set. Very important concept, go back to it. So a data set is nothing but a Python class which contains these properties. So very cool, let's build a data set. Dataset also contains some nice properties which we're not going to define from scratch. So we're going to actually derive properties from the dataset class which is already provided by PyTorch. So if you remember anything that is related to data is contained within torch.utils.data. We're going to import dataset. Also going to be importing something known as a random split, which is what I'm going to be using to split my data into the training and the testing set, because this doesn't do it by default. Some other functions which I'm going to be importing. I need OS because I'm dealing with directories, and if I want to traverse through my directories, you need the OS library within Python. And since I'm dealing with images, I need to be importing the image submodule of the PIL class. PIL is the standard Python. It's called Python image library, the most basic library that you use to handle images. Anyway, so let me just create my cats versus dogs dataset. And it's going to be a child of the dataset class. Standard, it's going to have a init, but I'm going to be initializing my class. Root, which is basically going to tell me like where should I actually look for my images, and it's actually contained within this parent class called images. So I'm going to pass that as a root. What else? Transforms. So transforms are important because that's the same as last time. Images cannot be used directly, so I need to convert it into tensor. So that everything is known as a transform. So by default, it's going to be none. All right. So what else does a dataset need? So the first thing that you need to do is identify what are classes exist within your library, within your dataset. So here I will need cats and dogs. I may or may not, go if I were in MNIST, I would have different classes 0 through 9. So I need somewhere to keep track of that. So self.classes equal to what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna enumerate whatever directories exist within my root class. So that exists in os.list there, root. And it's essentially going to go through that root image and it's going to say whatever directories exist, that is cats and dogs. And that is going to become my classes itself. And because Python doesn't understand cats and dogs, the strings itself, you need to tell them, you need to give them a name, right? So that becomes, so cats become 0, dogs become 1, for example, or anything like that. So that has to be made sure of. You need to assign a number that is 0, 1, 2, 3 to cats and dogs because computers don't have cats and dogs. Anyways, so because of that, I use something known as enumerate, which means that what essentially is going to do is that v is going to be the value itself and I is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, the index. And I'm going to basically be assigning, I'm going to say that make a dictionary that's going to have cats. Let's say, for example, in a dictionary, and the value would be the corresponding number that PyTorch would understand. That is 0, 1, 2, 3, for example. So we'll see how that looks like. Transforms is equal to, well, I mean, by default, if it's nothing, then I want PyTorch to do nothing to my data. So I'm just going to go lambda x, means that just return x directly if PyTorch is nothing. If not transforms, which means that if transforms is none, else just transforms itself. So self.transforms between that. And self.x is equal to x, self.y is equal to y, because the dataset contains two attributes, x and y, so that's very important. Now let's go through all my datasets, through all my images, and let's build the dataset itself. So for that, I'm just going to use very standard functions for parent, directory, and file name, and os.walk, root. So what it's going to do is it's going to recursively go across the entire directory and find images, right? And I'm going to say, let's actually see what it looks like, by the way. So, by the way, how many of you guys are on campus? Okay, so most of you are at home anyways. I'm assuming some of you may be on campus, so I'm not going to take the, so I'm going to try to finish it on time and we're going to continue whatever we're going to do next time. Let's just, just accelerate this. This is very standard code, by the way, and you can find it on, and I would have loved to show you like how it actually works, but just for sake of time, let's just, like, this is standard code and you can experiment with it, like how it goes, how it works. Essentially, this for loop, for within for loop. What I'm essentially doing over here is I'm saying that whenever you find a JPG file, just add the image itself to the X, um, and the corresponding label to Y, right? Yep, that's that. That's done. I need to define a def len or dunder len, sorry, which is nothing but it's gonna return me some value which is the length of the data set, which is nothing but length of X itself. Because X is a oh sorry, these are empty lists by the way. So because now we've created like a length, we've created X's and Y in terms of lists, I can just simply return uh, the length of self.x. Yep, that's gonna work well. And finally, def get item. It's gonna take self and a number I, which is basically gonna say that when I'm gonna say that square index one is gonna give me X and Y corresponding to item one. So I'm just gonna go self dot. Where am I missing the colon?
In the if statement, I guess.
Sorry. But thanks, Ishan.
Yep.
Return. All right. So first thing that you need to do is that okay. Ideally, all you need to do is that return self dot x I and self dot y I. All right. But uh, because I mean, image itself is not of any use to me, and I need a tensor, so I need to first apply the transform on my data itself. So I'm going to do something known as I'm going to define another function which is going to apply the transformation. So self dot apply pfms x and whatever self dot transforms, for example. Yep. Uh, yeah. Let me just define this function over here. F self dot apply. Sorry. F apply pfms. Taken is going to take in the x and it's whatever uh, transforms that need to be applied over here. All right. So it's simply for tfm list x is equal to tfm x and return x. That's it. As simple as that. All right. So now my data set, what is it? Cat, let me just say data. Data is equal to cats, which is now data set, transforms equal to, and I need to create a list of the transform that I need. So the first is standard dot vision dot transforms dot to tensor. The second I need to do is something known as a cropping. Now the problem with that is because I mean I'm going to be creating data loaders with my data, and the problem with data loaders is that they can only create batches with data sets or with data that are of the same shape. The problem with the data set that we've downloaded right now does not guarantee that the shape of the entire shape is the same. So the simple solution to that is that you cut out a small section image which is going to be of a particular fixed shape, and that you can create a batch with very easily. So I'm just going to go dot vision dot transforms dot center crop, and size is going to be 300. Let's say. I mean that makes very much sense. Uh, Hope that works. Land data. Let's see. Yep, it works. 396 images within my data. If I say data 0, for example, it's going to give me X and the Y. Oh, there is some mistake. cat sources dot data set. What are the transforms? Transforms. Spelling mistake maybe?
Sir, in the transforms in the init function,
Oh,
self dot transforms. Yeah.
I got the mistake. I didn't put the is equal to sign. So it must have given me an error, but apparently. Yeah, this works well. So it gave me x and y, x dot shape, y dot shape. I hope it will. Yeah, so this is gonna work like this. Sorry, it's an integer. Oh, yeah, that is what it is. Anyways, so now it contains three channels, 300 by anyways. 300 by 300 is the length and width. So now I've done that. Next is I need to split my data set into the training and testing. So I'm going to define a function which is split data set by percentage, which is, by the way, I'm going to say that I want an 80-20 split or a 70-30 split. So that is what I'm going to be doing. So data set goes in first, and I'm going to say that PCT is equal to 0.8 by default, which means that 80% is going to go into my training set, remaining into my testing set. First thing, I need to assert that the percentage is between 0 and 1. What if a person passes in 1.1? That needs to be avoided. 0, CT, 1.0. And you can just pass in a string which, in case an error comes, it says that PCT should be float between 0 and 1. Anyways. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that function which is provided by PyTorch, this random split function. You can look at how it works, but essentially how it works is random split data set, and I need to pass in like the indexes by which it's gonna split. So random split doesn't take the percentages; it only takes the splits. And so I'm gonna do int PCT times length of the data set, and then length of the data set minus int PCT times the same exact value. By the way. Yeah, I hope this works. Let's see if it works or not. Uh, train DS, valid DS equal to split DS by PCT. Data content len train DS or len valid DS is fine. Yep, it works. So 316 data points within the training data set and 80 data points within the. So that's a 80-20 split, or somewhat nearby. Anyway, so now I've done with that standard stuff again. I need to create my data loader. So train DL, go to data loader, train DS, batch size, go to 64, shuffle. I need to shuffle the data set as well because I don't know if the data set is shuffled or not. And my valid data set, valid data loader, equal to data loader, valid, yes, That size is going to be twice the size of the training dataset, which is going to be 1.8. And shuffle, you don't actually need it to be true. It can be false. Because, I mean, you just need to iterate it through, every data point, and the order doesn't matter as such. Anyways, that is that. I have that. That is done. Now I need to create my model. And I'm going to stop after creating the model, and we're going to continue this next time. So we're going to be using something known as the Resnet architecture, which is a very cool architecture which was produced back in 2015, and it's still, like, let's say, like one of the most strongest architectures that exists in computer vision. And it uses uses the concept of a skip connection, which basically means that after every 3 by 3 convolutions, you actually just take in the values, and you the output of the convolution itself. We're going to discuss this through next time, because I think we don't have time right now. But let's actually just import this architecture, and I'm going to be using something known as the Resnet 18 architecture. We're going to be discussing this next time. What it is: vision.models, Resnet 18, and I'm going to be using something known as a pre-trained architecture, which we're going to be also discussing next time. I just want to show you that it works. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so this is the Resnet architecture. Let's see. It starts with some convolutional architectures, of which takes in 3 channels as the input, gives out 64 channels. Then there is some batch norm, ReLU, max pool. Again, there's convolution, which takes in now 64 inputs, again gives 64 outputs, and blah 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 blah. Anyways, let's go to the end of this, and let's see that there were 512 input features, and out features were 1000. And let's say what's the significance of this 1000? This 1000 actually comes in because it's actually the number of classes which exist in the ImageNet dataset. It is actually a dataset on which this has been pre-trained, which we're going to be discussing next time. But now, since we don't have 1000 classes, I need to actually, like, custom replace this particular layer according to how many classes I have. So I have only 2 classes over here, cat and a dog. So I need to replace this particular architecture with something which is going to be useful to me. If you remember, we can actually tap into the particular modules by the names itself. So Resnet 18.fc is going to give me this linear layer, and I can simply replace this by nn.linear in features. Features is equal to 512 as usual, but out features is equal to be 2. Now let's print out Resnet 18. Now you can see that the output is going to have output features is equal to 2. And it's going to work as well, by the way. Now if I do Resnet 18x.shape, I hope this works. I think that it will work. Yep, it's working. It's a little slow, but let's see. Yep, it's working now. So my model is working, and let's actually learn how to optimize this next time, like how to train this model next time. So this is the Resnet architecture. By the way, you already know how to train this, so I'll leave it up to you. If you want to train it, you can do it within these 2 weeks. So this is your task for the next 2 weeks. Play around with this Resnet architecture, train this if you want to, and see like how this works. And we're going to continue this next time. So next time we're going to be continuing with some more computer vision, advanced architecture, some more architectures like the unit architecture, segmentation tasks, and whatnot. So I'll see you guys next time, and I'll be staying over here for a minute or two.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You had mentioned about CPU and GPU. You were telling that you will show it this class.
CPU and GPU, yeah, that needs to be done. Yeah, we'll do that next time. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
It's not very hard actually. It's just basically everything that exists in the PyTorch library, like the GPU in every every deep learning library exists by the name of CUDA. So the CUDA is a deep learning library in GPUs. So all you need to do is Resnet 18 CUDA is equal to Resnet 18 CUDA. CUDA. You also need to put in the X's and your Y's into CUDA. So that need to be put into the GPU. So this is essentially the process of putting into CUDA. So by the way, you need to change your runtime to like a GPU, and we're gonna do that next time. But this is essentially how you do it, and that's all. That's all there is to putting your models from CPU to GPU. That's all. Anyways, we'll do that next time. I'm gonna stay here for 1 minute, 2 minutes more, in case anyone has a doubt, and then we're gonna be leaving.